Hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever CDW Cisco Solving Security live stream. Today we're going to be talking about some of the security challenges facing Canadian organizations and some of the tools that we can use to deal with those challenges. We're going to start by discussing the importance of speed and how IT teams from small business to enterprise are leveraging integrated and automated tools to deliver better security. Next, we're going to move to how automated threat hunting tools can be used to uncover those pesky known unknowables. And then we're going to finish up by discussing on how all threats lead to the endpoint and how endpoint security can be best used to protect your most valuable assets. After that, hopefully we can get to some questions from the audience. My name is Owen Dykstra, Inside Solutions Architect with CDW Canada. During my 20-year career in IT, I've worked across a variety of roles from technical support to systems administration as an IT specialist working in networking and security, and across a number of verticals from advertising to film and television. Early last year, I changed over to CDW Canada, and now I work with the Integrated Technology and Solutions team, helping customers design and choose the best security solutions for their organizations. Joining us today, we have Sinister Segen from CDW and Sean Earhart from Cisco. I'll turn it over to you guys to introduce yourselves.
Great, thanks Owen. Hi everyone, and thanks again for joining us this morning. My name is Sinister Segen, and I'm the Field Solutions Architect for CDW. I've been with the organization for just under a year now, but that's a small subset of the last 20 years I've been in IT in general. 13 of those have been very security focused in a variety of different roles. Anything from security admin, security analyst, security architect, some consulting work, and I've been in a number of different verticals from financial services to telcos. So as Owen, we do our best to try to provide the best security solutions to our customers, and happy that you were able to join us this morning, and hope you find the session helpful.
Perfect. My name's Sean Earhart. I'm what's called an advanced threat solution specialist at Cisco, which basically means I get to travel the country of Canada, talking to all the cool people about all the cool stuff that we're doing and all the most interesting threats that are out there and how to defend against those. Previous to Cisco, I worked at a number of different endpoint security and security organizations in Toronto, where I'm based now, as well as Chicago and Vancouver. So it's 11 years of talking to organizations across North America about how to defend against threats. And you can see I've got my laptop here. So I'm excited because we get to do a lot of demos and do a lot of interaction today. So it's going to be a great session. Looking forward to it. Right on.
So Sean, you've been working in the security realm for quite a long time. What are some of the big changes you're seeing from Canadian organizations when it comes to security?
When we travel the country, we see accounts of all sizes. So whether it's the federal government, provincial government, cities, small organizations, banks, telcos, and they're all struggling with the same issue on the attacker side, and that is the speed of attacks and the relentlessness that we're seeing from the attackers. How that shows up is really automation on the attack side. And I've got an example of that. Let's just set this up. We've got network security, we've got endpoint security, we've got email security, all those normal things that an organization of any size has. They've all put those 3 layers in place. And let's just look at a standard attack. So here's ransomware. This particular case is Lockheed ransomware, and we'll pick on, say, Frank in accounting. So Frank is at lunch, but at noon, a file comes down, and it's malicious. It's email gateway. The email gateway has been doing well, but today it made a mistake. So Frank comes back at 1 o'clock or 1:45 and opens it up, and of course, it's got a nice socially engineered payload that says, hey, if you don't open this invoice, or if you don't pay this invoice in 24 hours, you'll be cut off. We've all seen those. And then, of course, he opens up the Word document that's the invoice, and it says, if the encoding didn't work, please enable macros. So now Frank looks furiously and tries to figure out, Frank types with 2 fingers, and he goes and tries to figure out, hey, how do I enable macros? Right. Once he does that, now the real trouble starts. And I'm just going to build out the rest of this attack. This attack took over 2.5 weeks to execute, but what's interesting about this is not just how it happened, but how the security tools reacted to each of these different stages. So here, just to the right of that file executing, we have some command and control communication. Great, firewall blocks, but who's watching that firewall and reacting to every single block? People can't get to those alerts in time. In this case, Frank goes outside of the environment, outside of the firewall, and now it's the Wild West, and his solution, the attack connects and starts downloading these files, these payloads, and of course, antivirus kicks in and says, I know that, I know that, I know that, and blocks it. And again, this continues on automatically until one of those files comes down and antivirus says, I don't know that one, I'm gonna let that one go. And then we've got more communication over here, and we've got files that start to be encrypted. And all told, we've got 26 false negatives and 18 blocks, and this threat succeeded. So the challenge is not just breaking in once, but the automation of these threats. And this is not necessarily an exotic threat. Think of this as a macaroni threat. It's not an advanced chef cooking this up. This is something that's fairly basic, but it's the relentlessness that's the challenge for organizations to deal with.
Sinisha, are you seeing, with the customers that you're working with, are they facing the same challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I speak to a lot of our customers today regarding most of the threat landscape and how traditional antivirus solutions are just antiquated, and they're not able to keep pace with the attacker speed, as Sean had mentioned. They're just falling behind in terms of being able to keep up with that, because attackers today, they're using automation to their advantage. They're trying to evade detection. They're trying to deploy malware without you actually knowing and how long that they've actually been there. So, a lot of customers I've spoken to, there was an instance that I've dealt with quite a number of times in the financial sector. Emotet was a general one that's hit a lot of the financial sector. Right. And this was a fairly nefarious malware threat, because it was able to evade so many detection levels. It would change its subject line from static detection. It would have multiple attack vectors like attachments, and then it would constantly validate or understand if there was a URL redirect, because knowing that certain sites would be brought down. It would have port randomization. It would be in multiple languages, right? So there's so many different elements and stages to this that it's just so hard for today's traditional antiviruses to actually be able to keep up with this.
Completely. So that's mainly on the attacker side. What about the defensive side? What challenges are there?
Yeah, I'd say almost the same applies. Speed and agility is definitely something that we need to keep on top of. It's definitely something where people now need to know more about the actual incident and what's actually impacted them. And there's a couple of interesting stats out there that. There's 1 million current open spots for security roles, and if that number isn't staggering enough, by 2021, in less than 2 years, that number is actually going to go to 3.5 million, right? So that's an astronomical jump, and threat actors are actually starting to strategically, take advantage of that. They're knowing that there's not enough resources, there's not enough time, there's not enough investment into their security effectiveness to be able to combat this. And there's another interesting stat that it's been done over thousands of organizations, that 77% of most organizations don't actually have a formal incident response plan. And that's also a staggering number, because when you think about it, no formal plan means one thing, that when a breach or an incident actually occurs, you're going to be in complete scramble mode. There's nothing else that you can really do to be able to contain that, other than just being able to try to rely on your antiquated solutions to keep up with what's happening.
Right. Wow. So that's the defensive side. How are you seeing Cisco overcome those challenges, Sean?
That's a great question, and this is probably the most exciting thing that I get to talk to organizations about, which is how we're delivering security, what I call assisted security. So how we're delivering not just another feature that you could turn on that might take you a couple of hours or a couple of days to try and configure and troubleshoot, but how we're doing the heavy lifting in the background so you don't have to. And a great technology that we've come out with is called AMP, Advanced Malware Protection. And that's very, very straightforward. It's backed by Talos. Talos are threat researchers. So that Talos group is 300 threat researchers located, of course, all across the globe, which makes them the largest private security research organization in the world. So wow. Governments have more people, but then there's Cisco. And so what we've got to do is we've got to feed Talos with tremendous data and then have them turn around protection to make sure that our customers are safe. And so AMP allows us to do that. Think about AMP as an enormous database of not just files, which is a great way of delivering a payload into an organization, but also file behavior. AMP is fed by our AMP for Endpoints technology. That's 12 million endpoints all across the world, feeding up 8.5 billion events every single day, all correlated in a 30-day timeline. We have 1.5 million new malware samples every single day going into that database. We see 178 billion DNS requests every single day. We'll see 600 billion emails every single day. So the data that we have is tremendous. And what Talos' job, which is fascinating, is they're out there on the front lines of security, working with customers, working with partners, working with other organizations to combat crime, but they're also trying to answer the question again and again, have we delivered perfect security? The way they do that with AMP is really straightforward. Any of these tools, email, endpoint, firewall, IPS from Cisco, they can report in and say, hey, I'm seeing this file, is it malicious or not? That's a standard check that a lot of vendors do, but AMP keeps analyzing those files, keeps analyzing that behavior, so if we decide in a few minutes we need to change our mind, we can do that. And that cascades down. You'll see a block in the firewall, you see an email alert. So in our case that we talked about earlier, where you've got the ransomware gets through the email gateway. When Cisco changes its mind, now the email gateway sends you a note saying, an alert saying, hey, by the way, I messed up 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago. And of course, if you've got Endpoint running there as well, that inherits that and is able to do that block. So AMP across the board is tremendous from a technology perspective to do the heavy lifting that the IT department can't get to. And then if we look at another technology, Umbrella, which of course works with AMP as well, so that's our DNS security. So that's as simple as saying, no, I don't want to send my DNS to my telco or my internet service provider that isn't delivering security, and what I want to do is two things. I want to secure that DNS, and I want to speed up my internet. So you change that to sending your DNS request to Cisco. So very, very straightforward, takes a very, very small amount of time, but there's tremendous technology behind that where we're mapping out the global internet based on DNS requests and are able to get weeks or months ahead of the attack infrastructure. And I've got a few things highlighted if you're interested in that, spike rank and sure. Predictive IT space monitoring. A quick Google search for people will be able to tell, hey, what's Cisco talking about here? How are they getting ahead of attackers? So there's a ton of stuff there. Now, if we wanted to see a demo, let's take a look at that. Let me just share my screen here. I'm just going to show you just a couple of things. We're just going to jump in. And what I've got here is the AMP for Endpoints console. Now remember, this is a tool. It's called a connector. So we don't call it an agent because it doesn't have to replace antivirus. It can work beside antivirus, and we have millions of endpoints out there working behind McAfee, behind Symantec, behind Windows Defender, whatever you have, whatever is your flavor, we have that. We can also replace antivirus with the simple checkbox, tell it, you know what, antivirus isn't there, to deliver complete protection, and we can do that as well. So you've got a flexible deployment modes there. And what we've got here is really, really straightforward. We're hunting for vulnerabilities. So we're identifying where are your most vulnerable computers? Which computer is that? So what we're doing, for example, is tracking versions of Java and other commonly compromised legitimate pieces of software, so that you're alerted to the fact that maybe one of your executives' computers has an old version of Java on it, and you have all the information you need in order to prioritize patching. Of course, we're also blocking threats, and you can see this here, and it gives you an overview of what threats were blocked and how we're seeing those, and of course, that's why you buy Endpoint Security, to block threats, and that's why you've bought it for 20 years now. But here's the real magic, is in this other area, in these compromises. So these compromises are very straightforward. We're stitching together the attack that might be in progress. So second to second, that behavior of that endpoint, we're looking at that and identifying, hey, you know what? Yes, we are blocking a whole bunch of files being downloaded to this one computer, but why is that? Well, to pick on Java again, the reason for that is there's a dropper on there, and Java's going to continue to try and download those files. But as a vendor, we can't block Java, because perhaps that will end your IT career, because your organization ground to a halt. So there are certain things we can't block because it's a bad idea, but you need to be aware of those. So not only are we tracking and blocking threats, but we're stitching together that second-to-second behavior and getting you informed. And I'll just give you one quick example before we jump out of what informed looks like. Here I was going from 30,000 feet down to 1 millimeter off the ground. I've got February 21st, I've got a compromise, I've got that, I can see that it's at 12 o'clock and on the 21st. And what's going on here? I can see here I have a malicious file that's been downloaded, executed. I've got some communication over here. But why was that downloaded? Well, guess what? We're back to Java. Java was compromised. Why was Java compromised? Really straightforward. Somebody went to pwnme.com. Real website. Don't go there. Don't sue Cisco. I told you not to go there. And then if I need to, I can block this thread. I can block Java. I can do all those other things. Again, disclaimer, we're not blocking on purpose. Anything you see in red would be blocked. And then I can right-click actually and check. I want to understand what the scope of my compromise might be. Where else in my environment is this particular version of Java that's being compromised? Is that on 614 laptops? No, it's on one computer. Right. So I know what's going on here. That's a good, quick glimpse into what's going on and how we're trying to solve that operational side of things.
Very cool. So let's talk a bit about the people. It's one thing to have your tools blocking at a really high rate, but with all the empty seats that Sinisha was just talking about in security, and people struggling to balance their daily tasks with learning about the latest threats, there's some pretty significant challenges there.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I have the privilege of speaking with many different customers across our nation here, and some of the common themes I'm seeing from many of these organizations is their time and knowledge challenge, right? So, how are they keeping up with these solutions? And I used to work on the client side most of my career. You'd be happy to put a solution in and just hope it blocked in quarantine, and you walk away and hope for the best. But now, people want to know more. They want to know more about what's potentially infected them, what's been compromised in their environment. And the thing is now they actually need to be able to report back to their senior leadership and provide that level of detail and analysis, so that they know that the current solutions that they have in place today are actually effective and worth their investment. So, a lot of examples I see, and again, experience this also on the client side when I work there as well, but we'll take a simple example of any threat that's impacted any organization that made the news, right? The first thing any senior leadership is going to do when they go home, after they have dinner and coffee and whatever with their family, they're going to hear this news story and then wonder, has this impacted my environment? And you can bet that the first thing that they're going to do when they get back to their office the next morning is gather the team and say, has this impacted us, right? And how do you actually provide that with the tools that you have today? I mean, it just doesn't provide that level of insight and that visibility that you need to be able to relay that back to your senior leadership. So you can't be able to provide present day influences, but you also need to be able to say how far back this has also been in your environment and what has impacted you during that time.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, shifting gears to our second major challenge, which is known unknowables. How can organizations gain a better understanding of what's happening inside their environments today, and how can they use that? What are the type of answers that organizations require easier access to? I guess more importantly, what makes for effective threat hunting?
Yeah, so my experience again, that threat hunting isn't necessarily just meant for large-scale enterprises. It's not just meant for the banks or the telcos or SOCs, even though this is definitely the tool for these large-scale enterprises. But everybody now wants to understand and peer into that level of analysis, right? They actually they want to know as much detail as they can provide. Now, every organization is a little bit different. In terms of your resources, in terms of your skill set, in terms of what you can actually be able to throw at these instances and occurrences. But you actually want a tool that's going to provide you with like in-depth knowledge, right? You want actionable items. You want to understand that root cause analysis as quickly as possible. So in my experience, you need to invest in a tool that's actually going to be something that has legitimate protection, has proper remediation, and proper incident response, right. But you also don't want to impact your operational efficiency at the end of the day. So most of the customers that are impacted or breached or just want to know more about that information, they ask a subset of questions, and generally they want to know if that tool is going to provide that level of detail. So they want to know method of entry, what systems were impacted, how was it impacted, how do we avoid this in the future, how do we deal with this today, right?
Great points. Awesome points.
Thank you.
So Sean, how is Cisco seeing organizations succeed in that space?
What we're seeing, which is interesting, is a tremendous amount of struggle and failure, and quite bluntly, and this is the #1 topic where we get where the phone rings and says, hey, you know what, we need to get better, where the VP of IT or the board of directors is saying, hold on, we asked very, very simple questions and we didn't get quick answers. And that is the challenge that we see between non-IT executives and IT teams, where you get asked a very, very simple question beyond just, is something blocked or are we okay? I'll give you an example of that. Here's something that really, really throws people. A 4-word question from the CEO, have we seen this? And here we've got an example from Forbes that is all about Olympic destroyers. So that was a threat that made a lot of news during the Olympics. So you had globally people at the executive level watching the Olympics and seeing, oh, there's an Olympic destroyer out there, and okay, now casually emailing or calling IT and saying, have we seen this?
Yeah.
A great example of this is WannaCry. So WannaCry made a lot of news and cost people a lot of money. And one of the challenges that we saw with WannaCry was the fact that WannaCry, there was a lot of blog posts that were going out that's saying it spread over email. And Cisco, our Talos organization, had to come out and specifically announce this is not spread over email.
Right.
Why is that? We have thousands of email customers, and they were calling us saying, hey, where's our email protection for WannaCry?
Right.
And we were saying it doesn't exist because that's not the way that it works. And so we had to come out and sort of correct that timeline. And so you have these IT folks struggling with this. Now, imagine if you have a team of 50, you have multiple people that you can put on this. Imagine if your organization is 50 people and you're wearing all the hats.
Right.
Now you're in real trouble. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to jump in and do a quick demo to show you exactly how this works. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm just going to do what a day in the life. So if it was Olympic destroyer, I'm just going to go out to the Google and I'm going to type in Olympic destroyer, and I'm going to get a whole bunch of results. In this case, 3.4 million hits. And now I'm going to have to start reading blogs. And I'm going to have to go, okay, hold on. My CEO wants to know. I've got to understand. There's screenshots, very helpful in there. I've got all this information I've got to read. And then I get to the bottom, and there's some IOC, some indications of compromises. So IP addresses, domains, file fingerprints, for example, that I can use. And now I could go, if I wanted to stop here, I could go and start searching my tools. I could go through my firewall logs and try to figure it out. But I need more information, so I would go and read a couple of different blog posts, and as we discussed, guess what? They contradict, and so it's a huge challenge. So What Cisco has done is taken a real step back from security and said, hey, you know what we're not going to do? We're not going to deliver more features that are kind of fake. We're not going to deliver more features that we say are going to block what we see in the marketplace is it's a whole bunch of marketing behind these sort of fake features. What we did, which was really smart, is we promoted a whole bunch of people who come from real industry experience. So people who built SOCs for a living. If you were a Fortune 500 company and your security operations center was terrible, you would hire some of our executives 10 years ago to fix that problem and turnkey solution, give you back a SOC that was excellent. So when we asked these guys and we gave them budget and we said, hey, build what you want, they came back and they said, we're going to solve this problem for everyone. So here's what I could do. I could copy and paste these. I can copy these and I can right click IOCs and I can do that. But we've also built a browser plugin. We've got this for Chrome as well as Firefox. And I can see it grabbed 9 malicious artifacts off this page automatically. So you don't have to necessarily be on a blog post. You can be in a web console. There's lots of security tools that have web consoles. So even if that tool isn't connected with what I'm about to talk to you about, you can just click there and grab that and say, I want to investigate, okay? So now what I've done here is really, really straightforward. I've pasted in all of those IOCs and into the top part here. That's what I did when I clicked that. I can do that if I just copy and paste as well. But you can see here it's kind of messy in the way they did it, in the way it pasted in. And that's really interesting because you could put in unstructured data. This is a messy part of security. So what's really fascinating about this is you could put in a Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was you get the idea. And an IP address, and it's going to ignore all that stuff and just use the IP address.
Cool.
Great.
And what it's doing is really interesting. It reaches out to Talos, our Security Intelligence Research Center. It reaches out to our databases, AMP Global Intel, private AMP Global Intel, as well as file reputation from Cisco, as well as it connects to your tools, your Cisco and your non-Cisco tools. So you can see here, AMP for Endpoints is a product we've talked about. Umbrella is a product we've talked about. ThreatGrid is our database of file samples that executes sandboxing for customers, 80,000 customers all over the world. And of course, down here, we've got VirusTotal, our first third-party integration, but it's got an open API. We have customers around the world connecting this to all sorts of Cisco or non-Cisco tools. And what's interesting about this is it's really straightforward to connect it. It takes just a few seconds. All you do is punch in your API token and tell it, hey, this is where my tool is. And then it understands how to talk to that tool. It understands how to listen to that tool, and it understands how to give that tool instructions if you need to. So now, if we go back to our investigation, really straightforward, I just clicked on investigate and I found a target. So I found one computer inside my environment that was impacted by this threat. And I can just tell, because I know the tool, what's going on here. What we've got here, before we get into the target, I'll show you this as well. Just pull these out. What's interesting about these are files, because there's no arrows, these are files that Cisco's seeing and coming back and saying, we have information on that to help you understand what's going on based on the data you placed in the console. And you've got a whole bunch of data down here. We won't get into this probably today to do that. But moving back to our target, you can see here we have one computer that was impacted, and we've got a malicious file. Cisco's identifying that as malicious. Right. Explorer.exe is here, and you can kind of summarize. Explorer.exe probably downloaded this file, but if you want to, you can actually pivot to the other tools. You can jump into AMP for Endpoints and go, what happened in the 30-day history? What happened on this computer?
Very
you
cool.
can also block. So you can block and say, I want to block this on my endpoints across the world. And also, it's connected to different tools as well. So it can inform your email security from Cisco. I want to block that. It can inform your firewall from Cisco. I want to block that, all with one click. So from an incident response perspective, you get answers in seconds. You get confident results. You get the ability to pivot and find more information. And my favorite part about this is the price. The price is free. Now,
Wow.
the cool part about this is it's not quite free. It's included. Our lawyers have made it quite clear that I need to stop saying it's free. It's included.
Right.
So if you
Right.
buy endpoints from Cisco, if you buy email security from Cisco, if you buy firewalls from Cisco, that's coming up. Firewall will be launched in just a few months. If you buy Threat Grid or Umbrella or any of the other tools we've talked about, Stealth Watch, it's all coming in here. You get access to this tool. So what's great is, when I show this off to large financial institutions, I've got 20 threat hunters sitting around going, that just saved me 6 hours a day.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Imagine the person who has 50 users, who wears multiple hats. This is so simple for that person to get real answers.
Right.
And not, I see an IP was connected in the firewall, but I don't really know what happened. So it gives them more confidence, which is always great for someone's career, delivering a more confident answers up. So that is Cisco threat response.
That's amazing.
That's really cool. And as you said, it's a great tool that can help IT teams, large or small, and at absolutely the right price.
Absolutely the right price. And the other nice thing is, if you want to understand how this tool works, it's 2 minutes.
Right.
So it's really, really straightforward to set it up and have people start to work on it.
It's amazing. I want to talk or bring up AI and machine learning in a minute, but just quickly, Sinisha, what are you seeing as routes to success right now?
So that's a long list.
Sure.
And it could be a lot of things to do in order to achieve that success. But I think that if you start with 2 basic premises, that's at least something that you need to set the foundation in order to achieve that success. So first off, you do want to maximize your data collection by leveraging machine data and artificial intelligence.
Right.
This is a tool that can efficiently be able to collect all your evidence, all your analysis, and all your data, and be able to correspond those events and bring it back into a point that you understand all the events that happened and how it happened. So you want to be able to navigate through these interfaces. You don't want to be able to struggle through, where do I go to find this information? Where do I go to find that? But again, when you find that level of information, as Sean's demonstrated in his demo here, you want to be able to pivot between the action points. So you find something, you want to be able to quickly navigate and pivot towards that, and just make your interaction in a time that you're ultimately going to be stressed to make it that much easier.
Right.
So second, you want access to high fidelity threat intelligence. I mean, that's just a no-brainer in today's day and age. You actually need to be able to combat malware occurrences that you just have no abilities today to be able to analyze. And the best thing about threat intelligence and having a strong threat intelligence community behind you is it's not only going to help you during your pre-analysis and all the activity that leads up to that. Let's just say you actually are impacted and you're hit with a piece of malware. It's going to help you during the event. But again, like we had mentioned, these are crafty pieces of malware. They can bypass certain activity because they're hiding under the cloak of legitimate services, right? So it's really hard to discover that. So you get retrospective reviews as well, right? You're able to look back and you're able to identify, you're able to correlate that back to the global community. So those are the 2 things that I think right now, if you're able to at least achieve those 2, you're definitely on that right track.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, well, let's take a minute and talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, because this is certainly the hot topic in security right now. A lot of noise around this. In fact, even my mom has put together a machine learning project for her book club. I mean, it's
my mom
right?
needs that.
So tell me, how are teams leveraging that to get faster?
Well, first off, so if you don't understand the idea behind machine learning, artificial intelligence, I mean, the idea behind big data analytics is that it's actually going to define and identify infected devices with certainty, right? So that's the idea. The idea behind false positives, I mean, that has to be something that, again, has been in the past. You want something in a solution that's actually going to be something that you can action on. So what it's going to do, it's actually going to understand the unknown, right? It's going to be able to tie malicious behavior to 0 days. And then what it's going to do is actually take and prioritize that data and give you a much more focused analysis, right? So, and then the most impressive thing about machine learning is it actually doesn't need that exact match in order to understand what that threat is, what the threat is. Right. So what it's actually doing is taking the characteristics of the behavior of that and independently identifying and categorizing that based on those characteristics.
Very cool. So Sean, how is Cisco delivering that?
That's a great question, and that's my second favorite thing to talk about.
Right on.
Not just because there is billions of dollars of marketing going in the security business saying, you know, machine learning and artificial intelligence is changing everything. Right. And I absolutely think it is. I had a discussion with my team yesterday where we were talking about this, and we firmly believe this is the next 10 years of what we will be talking about. You know, in 10 years, it's going to be our AI fighting against your AI and who's going to win because it's too complicated and moving too quickly. Right. And especially when you think about on the attacker side, so much better funded than most organizations, they are reaching out to this and in order to dynamically change their attacks. So at Cisco, when we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, Cortex, that's our label for that. And Cisco, like any large company, is a little bit quirky in that you'll never see us go in and say, we have this brand name machine learning engine in this product or that or the other thing. We brand everything across the organization. So Cortex is that global brand that we have. And what's also interesting about machine learning is there's a lot of really small companies or AI, and they're saying, oh, we're doing this and we're doing that and we're leading with artificial intelligence and machine learning. There's two things that are really critical. One is data. You have to have a very broad data set. The other challenge is there is a transition from delivering one breakthrough in one area, the way we have with our servers, for example, or with our collaboration suites, for example, or data center, and what we're doing with AI and ML there, and taking that intelligence and those PhDs that delivered that, and also focusing them on security. Right. So there's an acceleration that you get with a company the size of Cisco that you don't necessarily have with a smaller company where you have maybe one or two data scientists instead of 77,000 people and tens of thousands of engineers. So you've got that Cortex, and when it comes to data, again, the challenge from a security perspective is you need that widespread data. So Cisco, as we talked about, we've got 600 billion emails, we've got 178 billion DNS requests every single day, we've got those 8.5 billion events from Endpoint, all coming together and all feeding in, and there's of course that two sides of you need training data. So you need really in-depth, high-fidelity, ground-level training data. Nothing better than 8.5 billion events every single day. Yeah. And I keep coming back to Endpoint, and there's something that I didn't mention, which is interesting, is Endpoint security from Cisco is based in Calgary. And when it comes to machine learning, this is a center of a lot of the brains behind what we're doing with those 8.5 billion events. And so those folks in Calgary have done some really, really interesting things from an advanced malware protection perspective. Unknown threat detection, we nicknamed this Spiro, and you'll see that highlighted, for example, in Gartner, calling out Spiro as a way that Cisco is leading in machine learning. And I'll give you an example. There's one thing to do a check against a file and identify, is that malicious or not? It's another thing to do what we're doing, which is taking 400 or up to 400 attributes of every single file, adding that into our training data, watching that file, and also using those 400 attributes to try and identify in our machine learning system called Spiro, is this malicious or not? Is it close enough to malicious based on those rules that no human could really come up with because they can't digest the amount of data that we're seeing? So that's Spiro. There's another couple here that I'll talk about just briefly. So behavior-based auto detection in the top right, for example. That's taking that stream, that 30-day recording of every single endpoint, feeding that data in and trying to understand, is that behavior close enough to malicious that we should be able to block it? On the other side is probabilistic threat score propagation. Engineers create these names.
That's a mouthful.
So, probabilistic, which I'm very tired of saying that word and screwing it up. I'm sure. Essentially, what we're doing is we're taking that data from all those files that we see on a day-to-day basis from 80,000 customers, 1.5 million new malicious files, looking at our umbrella data. So a domain resolved to an IP address, and that IP address is malicious. Let's take a look at the files that are being downloaded from those IP addresses, take the genetics of those files, and use this system to come back and look at all of the other billions of files that we have to identify if we've missed anything. And again, that type of machine learning system is great at that. And the last thing is the expert system from ThreatGrid. ThreatGrid's our file sandbox. It analyzes those files on behalf of all those organizations. And what ThreatGrid does, which is really, really interesting, is it doesn't just give you back a static report, which everybody does. All of the behaviors of that report are actually correlated with the results of files we've seen from other organizations and what Cisco's contributed to ThreatGrid. What's neat about this is you don't get access to other people's files, and nobody gets access to your files, but if you upload an Excel spreadsheet with a macro that reaches out to 3 malicious IP addresses, the report of this file, we don't obviously give you any identifiers that would reveal what that file is or who it is, but it reached out to these 3 IP addresses, and this is how that attack worked. So ThreatGrid automatically connects there, brings in that data so you see it, but our expert system looks for unique combinations of behavior. Malicious behavior that nobody's ever seen before. Figures those out, and then it's called an expert system because it teaches not only people, but other tools at Cisco how it figured that out. And that's an expert system. So that's a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes. I'll just flip over a little bit. I'll show you a little bit, again, on ground level, how that's, for example, on the endpoint, how that works. For example, we took hundreds of millions of samples of ransomware, ran them through our expert system, and identified what are the tells that ransomware gives off at the last seconds as it's starting to encrypt files that make it different from backup or another tool that touches a lot of files. So using those systems to analyze that massive amount of files and then coming back and going, okay, customers, here's a checkbox that you get for free. It was included. And you turn that checkbox on, and we're going to watch for that behavior. And as ransomware, if ransomware succeeds, and all of your security fails, your last line of defense on the endpoint, it's going to still be able to block that and be able to say, hey, you know what, that's malicious. Another area is something like exploit prevention. So on the endpoint, again, here's an example of our systems coming back and saying, you know what, you could write thousands of rules on an application could do this, it can't do that, it can do this, it can't do that. So for example, trying to keep other processes from attacking memory at runtime. We're able to look at that and take another step back and say, okay, what we're going to deliver based on our data is a checkbox that you could turn on, and what it does is when an application loads, some of the most attacked applications like Microsoft Word and different things like that, what we're going to do is we're going to load a 1 meg DLL, so it's very, very lightweight, that's going to instruct Microsoft Word, change the way you reserve memory, randomize that. Okay? Change the attack landscape. And then what's really neat about this is it presents a fake decoy version of memory. So anything that comes along and tries to inject code into Word's memory, not only is it injecting wrong, it's going to bounce off, but we can go back and kill that process. That's automated. That just runs in the background on or offline. So there's a tremendous amount of technology that's coming out of this. And my favorite thing is this, and it's very straightforward. We're going to do another demo here, and I will share my screen. And again, I can't say it's free, it's included again. So this is something that's called cognitive threat analytics. Okay? And what's fascinating about cognitive threat analytics is how it uses machine learning to eliminate an enormous amount of work. Okay? All of the customers out there who have web proxies, they're creating web access logs. This IP connected to that IP and exchanged this amount of data, for example. And the challenge with those is nobody ever does anything with them. They just get collected and collected and collected. And this isn't just a web proxy from Cisco. You could have a Blue Coat web proxy or a WebSense web proxy. You shouldn't, but if you did, you can, if you have that, that's fine. This works with that. And what it does is it uses those web access logs and creates a normalized profile of every single device and every single user inside the environment. And what it does there is really fascinating. Let's just take this video system, for example. If it called out to an IP every day at noon and connected and said, hey, what we're looking, I just want to see if I have an update.
Right.
Okay? So it does that for 300 days. And then on the 301st day, it calls out 3 times to 3 different IP addresses.
Okay.
Nobody's going to look at that. It's just going to be something that happened.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So then on the next day, it exchanges a tremendously high amount of data. So, you know, a couple of megs more than it was supposed to, or 100 megs, or even more than that.
Right.
Again, you might see that in your firewall, but you're busy, you might not get that. So what this does is it creates a normalized profile of every single device,
Right.
and then analyzes a drift from that profile to try and identify, is this just new software that was installed on that device, or did they do a firmware update to an IoT device, and it's just changed a little bit, so I shouldn't tell you about that. But it's tracking down attacks that nobody's seen. So it's fascinating, and again, it's included. It takes 15 minutes to set up. You get it free with Endpoints. You just need a web proxy that it works with.
Yeah.
Right.
So coming back, so that's some of the different areas that are exciting in the ways that we're using machine learning and artificial intelligence to really deliver accelerated security to our customers.
That's super interesting, and so we're seeing organizations can speed things up now by adding artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities. But what about on the human side? Sinister, why don't you tell me how people can deliver more security?
Sure. So all of these products and all the great advantages that the automation and integration is bringing is just reinforcing everything that we're trying to deliver in this live stream, which is that you want sound reliance on tools that are going to do that heavy lifting for you, right? You want something that's going to do proper categorization. And again, to go back to the essence of this, you have more operational tasks that you want to be able to focus more on. So this is actually going to help you reduce the stress in what ends up being one of the most stressful situations you're going to actually incur in some of your security profession. I mean, when I worked on the client side, I was kind of on that bridge of when ransomware and all these crazy malware threats were coming out. I didn't have to necessarily deal with this scale. However, I was still in panic mode whenever we had an outbreak of some sort, right? So this is actually going to help you reduce. So what you actually want is, this is going to be something that, is going to provide you with detailed levels of behavioral analysis. And that's not going to substitute for the human behavior. That's actually just going to reinforce and enhance the ability to detect it and to be able to react to this. Because this is, again, something that at the end of the day, you are not able to rely on just the tool to do that work. It's not meant to actually replace humans. It's just actually meant to make your job a bit easier and allow you that visibility that was lacking in the past.
Very cool. Very cool. So shifting gears to our third and last challenge, which is all threats lead to the endpoint. If the endpoint is the last line of defense, how can organizations best defend them?
So that's a great point. And in my experience, it's not necessarily always the last line of defense. Some customers, again, it's their only line of defense, right? And that could be for a variety of reasons, right? Digital transformation, mobile workforce, budget constraints, skill sets. I mean, whatever that reason might be, sometimes you just realize you don't have that perimeter barrier anymore. You don't have that moat that you can wrap around your company and say, we're now protected, right? So that doesn't mean either way, whether, we obviously recommend a layered defense. That's always going to be proven to strategize in terms of how you defend against these things, but never neglect protecting your endpoint, because that's the end goal. That's the target for these guys. That's really what they're trying to achieve at the end of the day. I mean, you want a resource that's going to be able to provide that efficient need to protect you against the new generation of threats. So that's why you need a new security tool that's going to actually provide you with that level of detailed analysis that you require. So I'm going to say that there's a couple of core things that you should look for in endpoint solutions. You obviously want something that's going to be flexible in the deployment options, right? So, right out of the box, what's your experience with this, right? Is this something that's positive for you at the end of the day? Is this something that adapts to your environment and your needs, right? So, do you need an on-prem solution or do you need a cloud-based solution? I mean, as much as I know that everyone wants to go to the cloud and that's something that is prevalent, it's not necessarily something that everybody wants. So you want that variety, right? Plus, you want something that's going to protect all of your endpoints, right? We're no longer just Microsoft shops, right? We're a flavor of different varieties, and every organization has something that's mildly different. Second, you want something that's layered prevention, and this is very simple math, right? You want something that's going to make or have multiple preventative engines in order to deal with the multitude of threats that's actually out there.
Right.
So tools should be able to evolve as in accordance to the new threats that are coming out there, right? So you want something that's going to be able to provide you that better analytics, something to determine the goal of the attack, like how the file interacted. Like you want, again, that level of analysis. And lastly, I think the most important thing is your rapid time to detection, right? I think that's very crucial in this because the average time that most malware sits on anyone's network is going to be in excess of 100 days, right? Wow. And that's nearly 3 months of not knowing what's happening behind the scenes, right? So being able to detect this is absolutely crucial. And at the end of the day, you want something that's going to provide you some time frames, some entry points. Where did the URL go to? What are the IPs? What are the DNS entries? Again, there's a plethora of information that you just want your tools to be able to provide in order for you to know that your security tool's effective in doing what you invested in.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sean, how is Cisco accomplishing those goals?
That's a lot of stuff.
That is a lot of stuff.
But the nice thing is, I think we've talked about a lot of that through the webcast today. We've covered a lot of that. I think we've shown a lot of demos and different things like that. I'm just going to do a very, very quick demo in order to respond to that, and then maybe we can squeeze some time for questions as well.
I think we have a few minutes.
Yeah, and so if we go back to Ampre endpoints, I think the biggest thing that we started by talking about this is flexibility of deployment. So we talk to organizations across the country, and obviously everybody wants to deliver better security, but they've got budget challenges. Their endpoint security might not come up for another 3 or 4 years. So we've licensed this in a very, very straightforward way. It's literally one SKU, which is the least amount of SKUs you can buy from anyone is one. And then also you can buy it in as few as 25 machines. So you could say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to make a very, very small investment, and I'm going to better secure my executives' laptops. Right. So you could do that. Maybe that's 26 or 27. I've got 4 critical servers. I want better information. I want better blocking and control of those. And again, as we discussed, you can put it behind antivirus. You can run it with antivirus. So you've got flexibility there. That's just the same SKU. It's really, really straightforward. And I'll just show you, once you deploy it, which my personal record is 58 seconds to have a client downloaded and on the computer.
All right.
And again, it's easy to test because, again, you can run it behind your antivirus to test it out and check out what it would do. Right. So it's really, really straightforward. But I clicked on events for a good reason. Once you do that, you've then got to decide what's important to me. What's important that I know about? Because you're not going to be in the dashboard all day long. You're too busy. So what's important? So what I've done is I've just gone to the events, and you can see here, obviously detected threats are important, different things like malicious activity protection. That's that ransomware detection firing off. But then we've also got, more important, these indications of compromise. So a Microsoft Word compromise, different things like that that I've got to pay attention to. And then I just subscribe. And it's really, really straightforward. Notify my SIM or send me an email alert immediately if this happens. So you've got that built into this, and you can set that up in just a few minutes to be able to go, I've deployed it, and now it's going to tell me if I have to look at it, and if it doesn't tell me anything all week, I'm good, I can do other things. So run silently, but run smart. While you're doing other things, while you're sleeping, Cisco is looking at that data at that stream of information from your endpoint and trying to answer the question that that every vendor should be asking, which is, am I perfect? And if not, how do I fix that? So, and then of course the tool will tell you anytime that it has a challenge. So I wanted to try to do that quick so we could have some questions if we have any from the audience that anybody's posted. Do we have any in the Q&A?
We do. I had some questions slipped to me as well. And I think we do have a couple minutes before we're wrapping up. So first question. Endpoint security has been around for a long time. What would be something that surprises people about endpoint security?
That is a great question. To start, I would say all of the things you don't have to do anymore.
Okay.
And that's the biggest challenge that I see is people come in and they say, okay, I need to worry about my antivirus definitions. That's a lot of the first thing people talk about is they say the nightmare scenario is I've got 5 or 6 different versions of this out there and they don't have the right antivirus definitions. The smarts are in the cloud.
Right.
You don't have to worry about that. So sometimes it takes us a long time to move someone off that that dedication to that challenge because we're doing so much more with that data than just trying to squeeze more definitions down on the endpoint. That's something I find surprises people.
Okay, that's super cool. Let's see, what else do we have? Predictive security is a hot topic. I'm going to lob another one at Sean here. How is Cisco doing that right now?
So that's another great question. One of the challenges in security right now is what you have to do to be a serious player is enormous. It's an enormous amount of investment that you have to do in order to track threats and be and protect your customers. So we have a lot of medium-sized and small vendors making outlandish claims. Right. And one of the challenges is, I saw on my Instagram account the other day, I was scrolling through and it was basically, we block all threats going off into the future. Okay, that's a pretty bold claim.
Huge claim.
And then it comes down to artificial intelligence and we do this and we do that. You get the idea. So there's a real, there's an expression, one of our leaders on the Cortex side and he says, if you're drinking that Kool-Aid, you're going to get a hangover. Right. You don't expect. Yes. Okay, so the thing is, it's moving beyond that. Predictive security is great if everything is up to date, and that's wonderful. But what are you going to do? You're going to move from 94% protection to 96%. 100% is not realistic. Of course. So what are you doing with that 2% that you missed 5 seconds ago? Right. And that's where I think that we have a huge leadership, and that's just expanding right now.
Okay, right on. So let's see, what else do we have? A lot of options were discussed. Which is the most important, and what should be the first right step?
That's a great question. Do you want to?
Well, I mean, I think I'm just going to go back to essentially what I was saying. I mean, the landscape has changed significantly, right? There is no one cookie cutter when it comes to how a typical organization sets themselves up. But again, strategize in terms of like from a risk assessment perspective, right? Like what are the crown jewels, right? So if a budget or a resource constraint is something that is something that's impacting you, I mean, don't say, I'm not going to buy something, right? Or I'm not going to look into this. I mean, what you want to do is be able to strategize and understand what is the best course of action to take, right? So is it best just to at least protect our crown jewels? Is it best to protect our leadership? Right? Is it best to protect our call center? Like identify what works best for you if you can't implement on a larger scale, but don't just neglect that fact. Don't just say, I don't have budget. Don't say, I don't have that time. Find that time. It's a worthwhile investment. This isn't something that, again, I don't want to say this, but this isn't just something that we want to sell for the sake of selling. This has validity. This is something that most organizations need to take serious. And endpoint security is not dead. It's just evolved, and that's what people need to understand. This is the next evolution, and this is something that people still need to be cognizant of and pay attention to.
Right on. Amazing point, gentlemen. I think we need to wrap things up. I just want to thank everybody. Special thank you to Sean and Sinisha for having this conversation with us today, and I want to thank everybody online for joining us. I hope you found this very entertaining, or very informative and entertaining. And if you have any questions about any of the products that we've talked about today, any of the solutions we've talked today, please feel free to reach out to your CDW account manager. and get one of us on the phone, and we'll have a deeper discussion about that.
Perfect.
So anyways, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out, and I hope you have an amazing day.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.